Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Let's stick with Brexit for a moment. I've said that a few times before and I'll say it again, no doubt. And the campaign backed by some MPs for a referendum on the final Brexit deal. Here's the Lib Dem leader, Vince Cable, speaking to his Scottish Party conference at the weekend.
I think one of the points to note in Scotland is the question, well, where are the SNP in all of this? I mean, my approach to working with the SNP isn't a tribal one, actually. We work quite well with them on opposition to the single market and the customs union. But on this absolutely fundamental question of having a vote on the final deal, they're embarrassingly silent. They have nothing to say about it.
Well, that was Vince Cable, the party leader. We're joined now by the Lib Dem deputy leader, Jo Swinson. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Just before I come to you, Jo, can you answer Vince Cable's question that he raised there in that clip? When it comes to the fundamental question of a referendum on the final Brexit deal, where are the SNP? Where are you?
Well, obviously, we support remaining in the EU.
That we know.
But what we don't know is exactly what is it that's being proposed. So what would a no vote mean? We vote against the final deal. Does that mean we send them back and get something better? Or does it mean we crash out, which is the worst of all possible worlds?
What would you like to happen?
Well, I'd like us to stay in. It's quite as simple as that. But it's unlikely that this Prime Minister, if she agreed to a second referendum on the final deal, would agree with that as the outcome. So at the moment, we're not going to give carte blanche to something when it's not been defined what that vote is.
Well, and that's a fair point, isn't it? Why not wait at least until October when the deal has been thrashed out?
Well, we are proposing having a vote for the people to be able to decide once the deal has, as you say, been thrashed out. And the sensible vote, in my view, is very clear that you should have, which is a choice between the vote, the deal that Theresa May has gone off and negotiated, because there was the mandate in 2016 for her to go and negotiate a deal. Give that to the people and say, do you like that? And if not, have the option of staying in the European Union, which I would think Philippa would agree with that kind of vote. But when that has been put forward, both in the Scottish Parliament and in the House of Commons, the SNP have not supported that. And I think, given that, I mean, this is a way for people, frankly, whatever their view on Brexit is, if you think that that it's a good idea, then you get the opportunity to say, yes, this deal is right. Although there's a lot of people concerned that the government is making a mess of the negotiations and the deal that come back will not be what was promised in 2016, in which case people ought to have the opportunity to say, well, thank you, but no thank you very much, if that's what's on offer.
Right, I mean, shouldn't the people just have a vote on the deal? Shouldn't they have a say? There's a sort of principle at the core of it, which Jo Swinson has just outlined, and the SNP's ducking it.
I don't think we're ducking it at all. But, I mean, Jo Swinson, sadly, and her leader are very hypocritical that the Scottish people, who voted very clearly to remain, cannot possibly have another independence referendum, but we can have another vote on Europe. So would it be a three-way vote? Hang on, Jo. Would it be a three-way vote? Because there'll be people who are against the deal because it's not Brexity enough. So will there be a no to the deal and remain, no to the deal and we want to be even further out, or yes to the deal? Because how do you interpret what a no vote means?
Well, that's why it does, I think, need to be really clear between yes to the deal. This is what the government...
But you haven't come up with a clear proposal.
Well, yes, well, actually we have. Yes to the deal, or stay in the European Union with what we have already, because that's basically what's on offer. I mean, you've got to assume, and one would hope the Brexiteers would assume, that, you know, difficult though it is, and as I say, incompetent though I think they are, that nonetheless they are trying to get the best deal that they possibly can. And therefore what comes back is the best thing that the British government can actually secure. But on the issue that you raised about the situation in Scotland, it is qualitatively different. In 2014, we voted on independence. That would
and
still
you told people the way to stay in the EU was to vote no.
To be honest, Philippa, the arguments I was using were much more about the economic and indeed the emotional ties between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom. But basically that would be a rerun of the exact same question. What we've got here is people voted on the principle back in 2016 at a time when you had many prominent leaders on the airwaves saying no one's talking about leaving the single market, no one's talking about cutting those ties economically, and that's now what it transforms transpires is on offer.
Although, of
So
course,
it's
that is
very-
disputed, as we've just heard from Ian Duncan Smith. There were even the Remainers, like David Cameron and George Osborne, talking about when we leave the single market and the customs union. Why are you so sure that if people voted no in a people's vote or a second referendum, that we would stay in the European Union?
Well, I think that's what the choice should be, because that's what's still possible. Because in terms of before we have left, before Article 50 has actually happened,
we would have left. We just would have rejected the deal.
So rejecting the deal, at which point the most obvious thing, and as I say, it needs to be clear when people go to cast their vote. I absolutely agree on that. But that is what is still possible to achieve in terms of what European countries are okay with. I mean, I've spoken to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ireland, ambassadors, France, Germany, Bulgaria. Actually, European countries will be exceptionally generous if the UK population says, if that's what the deal looks like, we would rather stay in. That is absolutely still a possible outcome. And those of us that believe that that is the best outcome should be fighting to achieve it.
So what happens to the people of Scotland who already made their view very clear, and indeed the people of Northern Ireland, that they wanted to remain, and their view is completely ignored? So you want a rerun of that. People of Scotland turn out again, vote to remain, and if it's a vote to accept the deal, they still get dragged out of Europe. So it doesn't solve the democratic deficit for people in Scotland or people in Northern Ireland.
Well, I think it's about not giving up, actually. There's still the opportunity here. We have not left yet. It is still entirely possible that we can stay within the European Union. That is what people in Scotland want. It's what people in my constituency want. And that's what I'm fighting to achieve.
All right, so when will there be a second Indie referendum?
Well, I think there'll be a second independence referendum before the next Scottish election in 21. I think the landscape since 2014 has changed utterly. People were promised, my husband's German, I know a lot of EU nationals who were warned, if you vote yes, you'll get kicked out and sent home. And they were told the only way to stay in the EU is to vote no. We have seen the Sewell Convention supposedly written into law and then told it's not worth the paper it's written on. And obviously we have the power grab of Clause 11 at the moment.
Right, but when precisely? Because let's say October.
Precisely.
Well,
it's not
but in
my
terms of you,
choice.
well, in terms of you, but you have a view, and there's a debate going on within the SNP in this contest for deputy leadership. Some are calling for it as early as next year. Would you favour that?
I would. Next year or in 2020, I think, would be ideal times. It's not going to be called. There's not going to be any discussion of a date until this absolute bourach of the Brexit negotiations comes to an end, and you can put to the Scottish people what their choices are.
I mean, you're calling for a second referendum on the EU deal. Why not an independence referendum?
Well, just to be fair, not actually a second referendum. Technically, if we're going to, this will be the third time that people will have a vote on Europe. This is actually on the deal, and it'll be the first time people have had the chance to vote on the deal. But because we had a very clear vote, the question would be the same: do you want Scotland to be an independent country or not? And if you look at the general election last year, where the key issue was an independence referendum,
and the SNP lost seats.
SNP lost 21 seats.
And in 2016, when a second independence referendum was a clear manifesto commitment, we won 46% of the vote. That's the highest of any government in Europe.
But you did lose seats, of course, in that general election. There was an admittance
in the general election.
Which is when it was the front and centre issue. Nicola Sturgeon had just... It was in Scotland the front and centre issue. It was the end of May that Nicola Sturgeon started talking about IndyRef 2. Theresa May called the election in April. It was absolutely clear.
Ladies,
I think you'd win it again. Why are you so afraid of it?
And on that question, we're going to move on to the next subject.